When I was in grade 8, I remember being given the authority to be a referee at our school's annual track and field day. Me and a couple of my friends, our gym teacher, gave us the power to ref some of the younger students. And I was in charge of the long jump. And so I took it very seriously. I was responsible for making sure that the students taking part in track and field day, would jump legally. They didn't, their toe didn't cross, the board, or they didn't fall forward into the sand or anything like that. He gave me this responsibility, and I was like pretty intense about it. I thought as a grade 8, I was given this power, like I'm all that. It kind of makes sense. I was in a role of authority, and that often kind of carries with it the temptation to become more and more controlling or bossy, all in the name of being seen as good, powerful, more important than others. As a grade 8, given that responsibility and that power, kind of went to my head. I'm like, who cares if they're 7 years old, right? Just think about it. Think about what it felt like when you've experienced having just a little bit of authority. Like when you've been a babysitter, right? Or you're at your job. If you're the oldest in your family and you have leadership over your younger siblings. Think about if you're the captain of your team, or maybe the first chair in the band and everyone's supposed to follow you. If you're leading a club or are looked to for advice by your friends. Even, something as simple as working hard for your grades. When people have to do what you say or rely on you in any way, it's tempting to want it just a little bit more control, just a little bit more power. But you see, having authority is tricky because we all know what it's like when authority isn't used well. We can list plenty of examples of bad authority figures, people who gave into the temptation to put others down so that they could seem more elevated. We swear to ourselves that when we finally gain more power, more influence, more control, we'll never abuse it like them. Okay, so we know what we're trying not to be like when the opportunity to have more authority comes up, but how can we make sure that as we gain more power, influence, and opportunities to lead, we're being the kind of leaders that we'd like to follow? How do we handle having authority in a world where putting others down is almost expected of people at the top? You see, according to Jesus, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's definitely simple. In fact, Jesus is the best example of how to use authority. Jesus was a regular guy born in a small town in the Middle East, and yet 2,000 years later, we are still talking about him. Even people who don't believe that he's the Son of God still can't help but notice the revolutionary things that he taught. Things that shook up the world and all of history. And a big part of how people talk about him has to do with what he said and what he did when it came to power and people. All people. The people who liked him and the people who had him killed. People who followed him and people who betrayed him. People who believed he was the Son of God and people who thought he was crazy. Jesus, in his position of authority, used his power to do what nobody expected. He led upside down when he used his power to turn regular fishermen into disciples or leaders who did ministry. He used his power to heal people who were outcasts in society and led upside down that way. He led upside down when he used his power to do miracles on days where religious leaders thought rest was more important, and when he used his power to value and elevate women in a society that disregarded and used women. In Matthew's account of Jesus' life, he writes down something Jesus said that covers everything we're talking about today. Jesus, in this passage, is talking with the people in authority in ancient Israel, this group of guys called the Pharisees. They were the religious leaders who held a ton of power and were always on a mission to try to discredit Jesus. And they try to trip him up by asking tricky questions. And in the conversation, one of them straight up asks Jesus, what is the most important thing for people to do when it comes to obeying God? And this is what the greatest authority, Jesus, says is the greatest thing that we can do. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 37 to 40, here's what he says. Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments." So Jesus is asked very directly, what is most important? And his response is simple. He says, love God and love people. Okay, hold on a second. For the 613 laws that the Pharisees were following to a T and encouraging other people to follow, there is no way it can be that simple. The problem with the 613 laws was some of them kind of left some wiggle room. And the religious leaders were the ones with the power in the day to determine exactly what these laws might mean. So you take, for instance, there was a law that forbade working on the Sabbath. And so someone actually had to determine just what counted as work. Was walking work? Was cooking work? Was riding a donkey work? Figuring out the answer to these types of questions were the Pharisees' entire job. And as long as they were needed to interpret the laws, they could use these laws to tear others down. But then Jesus came along saying that the power isn't actually in interpreting all these laws at all. The power is in loving God and loving people. In other words, in the upside down kingdom, power is for lifting up, not for tearing down. You see, real authority is supposed to be based in love. And using authority the right way is actually about loving God, loving yourself, and loving others well. Think about it this way. When you make sure to get a healthy amount of sleep, or you keep relationships that make you better, or you do your best to think kindly about yourself, that's loving yourself well. When you choose to honor your parents, respect your teammates, and stand up for others, that's loving others well. And when you're living in ways that honor what God says is best, that's loving God well. We actually have options in life when it comes to using our authority. We can choose to use our power in a way that harms others, or we can choose to lead with love. We can actually be a part of an upside down kingdom that uses power to build up, not tear down. Another way to say it is this: authority without love is just poorly used power, and power used poorly never ends well for the person in power or the people under their authority. One of the most brilliant and courageous people in history summed the idea up this way. This is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Here's what he says: "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." You see, power used for good is loving. Love done well uses power for the purpose of bringing justice and peace to the world. And the good news is that God gives us everything we need to use our authority in the loving ways that he says are best. There's another writer in the Bible named Paul, who was one of the most influential leaders in the early days of the Christian church. And he says it this way in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. He says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." God gives us all the power, the love, and self-discipline that we need to live the way that he says is best. And what does God say is best? He says to love him and to love others. That is the way of the upside down kingdom that Jesus came to establish. And this doesn't mean that we're going to get it right all of the time, but it does mean that God gives us everything we need to get it right the next time we're given authority. And so you need to get this today. You need to memorize it. You need to live by it. You need to remember this. It's so important. In everything you do, as you gain power and authority in your life over the years, remember this: in the upside down kingdom, power is for lifting up, not for tearing down. You see, what we do with authority is important, because authority has the potential to be a powerful tool that helps others, but it also has the potential to be a powerful tool to treat people in harmful ways. All of us can choose to use any authority we have to lead ourselves well so that we can lead others well. Just imagine what this would be like. Like, imagine a world where we all used our authority in ways that show genuine love for God through real love for ourselves and for others. You see, leading with love looks like making sure the kids you babysit don't just feel physically safe, but they feel like you genuinely care about spending time with them. It means treating your younger siblings like you love them because God loves them, even when they annoy you to no end. It means standing up for the classmate who is being left out or being made fun of. In other words, in the upside down kingdom, use your power in ways the world least expects it. This is the whole idea of the upside down kingdom. We use our power and authority in ways that by human standards, the world least expects it. This is what Jesus did and calls us to. Genocide, murder, gossip, abuse, bullying, and hate, so much of it can be traced back to power without love. On the other hand, when people use authority in loving ways, the world actually changes for the better. Hungry people are fed, hurting people are healed, desperate people experience hope. This is what authority, power based in love does. This is what Jesus' upside down kingdom looks like. And so, what do you want the future to look like? Like, the good news is every time you have an opportunity that gives you authority, you have the chance to act like Jesus by leading with love. And so, in closing, with all of this in mind, I'd love for you to think about your answer to this question right here. And it might be a good conversation piece for you with your parents, your friends, in your life groups, or just, again, introspectively thinking about this. Have you ever experienced authority that has been used to build up? And then how have you experienced authority used to tear down? Just think about that. See if you can find some examples. Create some conversation in your circle of influence. And again, let's all of us join in what Jesus invites us to be a part of in ushering in his upside down kingdom. We use our authority, we use our power, but it is always based in love. And we seek to build people up, not tear them down. Would you join me in that?